Welcome to Up on the Bars discussion with your host, Roy Bain.
Well, we're here for a pre-recorded version of Up on the Bars. We get to sit at home and do it early in the day and not be so tired at the end of a work day. We have a return guest, Mr. Rob Albright from PRN. How are you doing, Rob?
I'm doing well, Roy. I hope you are as well.
Doing great. When we talked before, you said we talked about doing the playoff preview show here. And when I messaged you the other day, you made me feel bad. You're like, man, you'll have to do it next week. I'm busy at Daytona working on NBC. It's like, that's when you realize, like, man, this guy's got a lot going on. It makes us
and it's actually better. We waited a week anyway with what happened at Darlington this past weekend, which I'm sure is one of the things we'll talk about today.
Well, that's why I was going to lead it up and kick off right there at Darlington. And I'm going to give some background on here. He messaged me, let's wait till after Darlington. Maybe we'll get some excitement to talk about. It's some controversy and some things like that. One thing that sticks out in my mind right off the bat when we're talking about that is Kyle Busch not making the playoffs. I think that is one thing that resonates in a big way. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I think that just sticks out like a sore thumb when we're talking about the playoffs.
You know what makes it stick out like a sore thumb even more than it otherwise would is just how diplomatic and non-confrontational, threatened he seemed to be in both post-race interviews after having a chance to move Harrison Burton for the win at Daytona and then getting almost to the back bumper of Chase Briscoe at Darlington. And if he'd used a move that his teammate did at Richmond a couple weeks earlier, he wouldn't have let it bother him that he couldn't quite get to Briscoe's bumper. He'd have just driven right on into him, and the rest would have been history.
Well, and there's high drama over those last 3 weeks when we're talking about it. You got Austin Dillon picked up a win, and that didn't get him in as well because of a controversial finish. Do you think NASCAR's ruling with him had any effects on how Kyle Busch approached those races?
Not in the least. Not in the least. They're teammates, but they're also individuals. They're individual teams. They work together back in the shop. But when it gets to be race day, you're solely focused on what your job is that particular race day, and it was with Kyle. And like you say, I was working the race at Darlington, and I happen to have Kyle Busch on our frequency. And he was a complete non-factor until about the last 25 or 30 laps of the race, when they had that final caution, and his crew chief said, let's come down and get 4. And he said, well, where are we going to come back out? We're going to lose too much track position. And the crew chief said, no, we're going to come down and get 4. And Kyle didn't argue anymore. He said, okay, you think so? And, when he got into turn number 1 and then immediately went by 5 guys, I think he restarted 8th. And by the time they came off of turn 2, he was running 3rd. And I thought Briscoe was going to be a sitting duck from there. So I think Kyle was pretty in his post-race interview. I think he realized that he was just very fortunate to even be as close as he was at the end because he had an 8th to 10th to 12th place car the entire race at Darlington. So would he have taken the win? Absolutely. If he'd have been able to get there and rough him up a little bit, I think bump and run would have been fine. I don't think he would have done a bump and wreck. If he could have cleanly gotten to Briscoe's back bumper, I think he'd have used it. I don't think he would have wrecked him, and he'd have won, and Briscoe would have finished 2nd, but he couldn't quite get there.
Yeah. And I have to ask, because I've always said something about Kyle Busch, and my opinion's not going to change, and you following this up is a little bit exciting. I have a love-hate thing for Kyle Busch. I don't like him when he has, like you said, a very confrontational post-race or whatever. But when I watch him off the track with some of the social media posts that him and Samantha do where they just randomly stop people and talk to him, he is such a great ambassador away from the track, but he is such I hate to use the term bipolar. He's bipolar at the racetrack. It's my opinion. And then when you hear him talk, it's like, man, that's brutal. But I understand he's just like you said, he's focused on what he's got to do on race day. And I think that's what makes him such a great driver is the amount of focus he can put in on that day.
I don't think there's any question. And I know if you listen to Sirius XM quite a bit and listen to some of the call-in shows, there are those that say, stick a fork in him, he's done. He's never going to win races again. And nothing could be further from the truth. I think Kyle Busch, even though he's been matter of fact in post-race interviews this season, he hasn't had potentially race-winning cars. And he finished second 2 weeks in a row, the last 2 weeks in succession, which would have put him into the playoffs. But in neither case was he a real factor till the very end. And I think though he didn't come out and say it, I think he recognized he still didn't have the best cars. But Randall Burnett made aggressive and good calls on the pit box as his crew chief, and he made good decisions in the race car to get. So he finished second 2 weeks in a row with 10th to 12th place cars. So I don't think he's done by any means. I think he's still as fiercely competitive as he's ever been. And here's what would shock me if he didn't win a race in these final 10. I think he's going to win one of these playoff races.
Well, and if you didn't watch the first time Rob was on my show, you need to go back and talk because he highlighted something during that conversation is the difference between a good driver and a great driver. And we've talked about it. Is the great driver can take subpar equipment and do amazing things in it. A good driver gets in a good car and does what's expected. Mm-hmm. And I think you're referring to Kyle Busch as a great driver because he's doing more than what the car is capable of doing and showing that.
Yeah.
So
he's never happy in the race car. And it's funny, if you weren't watching the race, if all you were doing was listening to his radio communication with his spotter and crew chief, race winning days, he is just as unhappy with his race car as when he's got a 15th or 20th place car. He's just never fully satisfied. And you don't want a driver to be. And yeah, that is a comment that I made, and I stand by that. And I think the great drivers will make adjustments to the way they drive a race car as a race progresses. The good drivers, they want to drive within their comfort zone. And if a car's uncomfortably tight or uncomfortably loose, they're not going to make changes necessary to force the car to do things that, and Kyle Busch is one of the guys. Kyle Larson is another one of the guys. There's a handful of them that will do that. They will absolutely make themselves uncomfortable in the race car to find a way to make it faster.
Right. So rolling that, let's get into talking about the playoff races. And you mentioned going into the playoffs, the number one point leader, Kyle Larson, right now with 2,040 points, could have won the preseason, I guess, for lack of better terms, whatever you want it, the regular season. Missed the championship by just a small, very fractional amount. Don't know the point amount. Do you think missing the race for the Indy 500 was that the decision? Was that the cause of that?
I don't necessarily think so. No. And he was in position to win the championship. Had Tyler Reddick not done something that no normal person would have accomplished, and I'm sure by now pretty much everybody knows that he was suffering from a stomach virus, and no more than 25 or 30 laps into the race, he was already complaining. Shortly thereafter, he was talking about his bodily functions and to be able to tune that out at Darlington of all places, where you're not only racing against 37 other drivers, you're racing against the racetrack itself. To be able to tune that out and run the race that he did and take a car that was, he ended up finishing 10th, I believe. And early in the race, it looked like, he was strong, but there were several guys that at the drop of the initial green flag, they were fast. And then we never saw much of them thereafter. But to even be in that position to possibly win or not win. Now, I think what did surprise me a bit was Larson, after dominating the Darlington race up until the last 40 or 50 laps of the event, to be seemed to be, he said, I can't really be that unhappy with my fourth place finish. I mean, I don't really get that, but he's that way. I mean, he He knew he had a great race car. He knew that at the end of the race, they might have just made and when we talk about minor adjustments at Darlington with these race cars, half a pound of air difference in the right rear of the car can be the difference between a car that's undrivably tight or undrivably loose. So the margin for error is so slim in these cars. And he just didn't have the best car at the end. He had run the best race and he'd had the best car up till that point. And I think he just knew it. He knew he had been beaten. And so I don't think, missing what he missed at the Brickyard at Charlotte, I don't think that was a deciding factor at all.
Okay. Well, and you mentioned Darlington. If anybody watching hasn't paid attention to Darlington, that is a hard track to race because it's completely different at either end. You got a big wide sweeping turn on one end and a short, narrow, got to make a massive left-hand turn down at the other end. It's kind of like an egg. So if you know anything about setting up cars, the car's not going to be set up perfect on either end because they have to put it in the middle and the driver has to adjust.
Right.
So and we're talking about that. I watched a video recently. I think it was Cale Yarborough. They had an in-car video from way back in the day of him driving Darlington. That was interesting to see back in the days of no power steering and all that. That's like, no wonder those guys always complained about being racing there. And it's hot and humid. If you had never been to Darlington, South Carolina, it is hot and it's humid. So,
yeah, no doubt about it.
So I found it interesting. Number 2 in points going into the playoffs is another dirt driver. And if you follow anything with dirt racing, you've seen Kyle Larson and Christopher Bell put on a heck of a show at the Chili Bowl. They both coming from, and I have to brag on it because our side of it, from a dirt racing background, seeing them 1 and 2, that's pretty phenomenal. But we haven't heard a lot about Christopher Bell this year. He's been quietly doing what he need to do and going into the playoffs, second in points. That's pretty spectacular in my opinion.
Yeah, he's kind of the Rodney Dangerfield of NASCAR drivers. He doesn't get any respect, or he doesn't get the respect that he deserves. And I think a lot of that is because he's just a good guy. He's a heck of a nice guy. He's the same guy away from the cameras he is when the cameras are turned on. He's a genuinely shy person. And though he is self-confident, he's not arrogant and he's not cocky. And he doesn't move the needle a lot in terms of love-hate relationship. He's not one of these people that polarize fans. Everybody likes Christopher Bell. Not a lot of people just love Christopher Bell. You don't see a lot of C-Bell merchandise at the racetracks. And it's not a reflection of his capability or even his personality, other than the fact that he doesn't polarize people. And I think that's why he's kind of flying under the radar once again this season. And to the last 3 years, he's been in the championship 4. You know what? I'm not a betting man, but if I were, I'd put a 5 down on Christopher Bell to win the championship this year.
Well, and we've seen it with the Chili Bowl with Kyle Larson and all that. He's another one of those that when it comes down time, he'll do what he needs to do to accomplish the goal. And that's just.
Well, and if you'd watched the race up until this next gen car made its debut 3 seasons ago in the Cup Series, the handling characteristics of Cup cars was relatively similar to the Xfinity cars. It just mainly a horsepower difference and a little bit of wheelbase difference. But these cars the Cup cars no longer drive anything like the Xfinity Series cars. The Xfinity cars, you can still slide them around. The Cup cars, you can't. It's kind of like an avocado, not yet, too late. And it's that way with these Cup cars breaking loose. And guys that can run that outside line like they do. But if you watch the Xfinity race that Bell won on Saturday, I mean, he had that car and you just thought he was racing on dirt. It looked like he was racing on dirt because it was just crab walking through the corners, and he had it about a 20-degree yaw 2/3 of the way around the racetrack. So he's good. He and Larson are good. That's why every year at the Chili Bowl, where they have 250, 300 entries, and they have the Z main and the Y main and the X main and all the way up and eliminating. every year. Of course, this last year, I don't think Steve Bell ran, and I don't think he ran the Chili Bowl.
Kyle Larson didn't either.
So. Yeah, neither one of them did. But when they both do, one of them's going to win it. It just, through all those eliminations and everything else is pretty incredible.
And that's a lot of racing when you pack in a week or something like that. And what I find interesting is, you're talking about that Kyle Larson raced at Darlington this past weekend, but he raced a midweek show in Chico, California at the racetrack out here that they do with the High Limit Series. So look at what he did all in 1 week.
Yeah.
So that's a crazy. Now we're going to get to Tyler Reddick that you mentioned. It goes into won the regular season championship, goes into the playoffs third. I don't know where Tyler Reddick come from this year. I know the name, but I don't know where he come from. So he's another one that hasn't been a highlight of the news, but hey, look where he's at. He's kind of leading the charge going into the racing or the playoffs.
Yeah, he's strung together a whole bunch of top 5 finishes and doesn't have a boatload of wins. That's why he's about 12 points back, I think, in terms of playoff points at this juncture. But you can't count him out because every athlete and every team hopes they peak at the right moment. And the right moment is going into the tournament, whether it's basketball or football or whatever. And once you're on a good run, a momentum run, kind of hard to stop a moving freight train. And that's been Tyler Reddick. And I think his 1 point win in the regular season championship standings would have been a whole lot more than that if he had been at full throttle himself. But that illness hurt. But there's another one. I mean, we could go down this list, Roy, and you may want to go down this list. I don't know how far you'll go down this list. And I could sit here and make a case for anyone. I won't say make a championship case, but I'd say almost every driver in this list, I could see a path to the championship 4 with maybe only a couple of exceptions.
Well, and we'll talk about some of these. I like to talk about them. We'll try to keep it short on each one of them because I know we like to talk and that's brutal. But the next one I want to talk about, and I want to preface this by saying we've seen in the news somewhere that there is no personalities in NASCAR anymore. We don't have a Dale Earnhardt. We don't have a Terry Labonte. We don't have just pick each one of those. We don't have those names. And so kind of everybody blends together. I'll be honest with you. I don't know much about William Byron, but he's had an impressive year. He had a lot of wins this year. Maybe not as consistent on the top 10s and the top 5s as the others, but he had a lot of wins going to this as I was looking at all this stuff. And I don't know much about the guy, to be honest with you.
So I would say that the last part of his season has been the exact opposite of Tyler Reddick. Byron he had a runner-up finish, but other than that, he's not been, the last 8 or 10 races, he's not been championship caliber. And I heard listening to the morning show on Sirius XM this morning, I did not realize just how bad Martin Truex Jr.'s last 10 races have been. Horrible, just horrible. And if you're not going into this playoffs riding a high, you're going to have to find some magic somewhere. And I don't see Byron. And at the beginning of the season, he won 3 or 4 races pretty early in the year and then kind of went silent for most of the rest of the season. He wasn't competitively running with Larson race after race as his teammate. And preseason, there were a lot of racing pundits that said William Byron's going to win the championship this year. Everybody likes to predict before the season even starts what they think. I don't think too many people, and I'm guessing the odds makers are not giving him a great shot. Although he rarely does anything dumb in a race car. He doesn't beat himself. If he's got an 8th or 9th place car, he may try to finish 6th with it, but he's not going to wreck it trying to win the race when he doesn't have a race winning car. Like Christopher Bell, he's a pretty low key guy, talented young driver, will win a championship 2024. I don't know. I would not bet on him at this juncture to win the championship.
So we talked about him. I want to talk about the next 2 kind of together, because the next two, they come across to me as the most polarizing figures that we have in the sport at the current moment.
Okay.
Because they're love-hate relationships with these guys, with everything you see and talk about it. You got Ryan Blaney and Denny Hamlin. 6th and 7th. When you're looking at those two, to me, when you look at the playoff chases, I'm going to say, this is me personally, just because of what I don't get to watch a lot of the racing because we're streaming other races. I don't get to see it. I follow up with what everybody's saying. You got Kyle Larson, Ryan Blaney, and Denny Hamlin. My thought process, knowing the history of those three cars, those are going to be the top three at the end of the season. I don't know what order they're going to finish in. That's my personal feelings. I don't know how you feel about it, but those guys are sitting, to me, in the catbird seat to do one way or the other.
Yeah, if we'd had this conversation 1 year ago entering the playoffs, nobody saw Ryan Blaney as the potential season champion, and he is the guy that just turned up the heat, turned up the wick, and off they went, and into the championship they went, and he didn't make any mistakes. He did everything right. They brought good race cars to the track. They had consistent good pit stops. They, as a team and as a driver, didn't make mistakes to beat themselves. And that's the way you win a championship. And I'm going to sit here again today and say I don't see Ryan Blaney repeating as the champion. Would I be completely shocked? No, but I don't think it's going to happen. It's kind of funny when you said these are two polarizing guys. I would say they're polarizing because Blaney is one of the most loved, and Hamlin is one of the most hated among race fans. And I think honestly, there are people who absolutely love Denny Hamlin, and we can't argue that the man can drive a race car. I mean, he's an incredible talent. But a lot of people aren't. There are not a lot of real serious Denny Hamlin fans out there. Those that are, and they wear the stuff to the racetrack, they get a lot of looks and a lot of, comments about their appearance. I hear it walking through the garage area.
Well, is it safe to say that Denny Hamlin is the black hat driver in NASCAR right now? That's my personal opinion.
He didn't used to be that way, but I think when it happened, and I think that the turning point was a few years ago at Martinsville, when on the last lap he wrecked Chase Elliott, the most popular driver in the sport, to get the win at Martinsville. And I think at that point in time, those who were sitting on the fence about Denny Hamlin became Hamlin haters. Those that were already Hamlin haters became even more so. And he has embraced that. And the thing is, a lot of what he says, if you really think about it, and I think some of the comments that he makes are intended to stir people up and to, pour gasoline on a raging fire. But a lot of times, if you read listen to his podcast, or you read what he says, he makes you think, and he's really a pretty smart guy. He's very just in terms of intelligence. And I think a lot of people do respect him in the garage area. And when he says something, they do listen. That doesn't mean, and they all respect what he can do in a race car, but not everybody is his best friend.
Oh, he makes no bones about it. And I always bring her up, and I get so much grief, and there'll be a bunch of comments when this airs. Danica Patrick and him going round and round is still one of the best highlights I have seen anywhere. I think that's awesome. But when you're talking about Denny Hamlin, I've got to tell you, I'm not a fan. I'm not going to go buy his gear. I don't cheer him on. I do listen to his podcast periodically because it's enjoyable. It's going down the road. Just like I told you, I listen to a lot of stuff going down the road in a semi-truck. How he made his splash into NASCAR is very telling of what Denny Hamlin was. He competed with J.J. Yaley for a car at Gibbs, and he come out on top when J.J. Yaley was the one everybody expected to go in there. Right. And you have to look all the way back to that and what he did to get his big break in NASCAR, for lack of better terms. he went and earned it. He didn't sit back. He did what he had to do. And that was, if you go back and study what he did, that was a huge accomplishment, in my opinion.
And he was a guy that did not bring money. It's pretty hard to get in good equipment today if you don't have sponsors already in your hip pocket, or if you don't bring a bankroll of daddy or grandpa's money. It's pretty hard to get level to level. And there's still guys that are getting, they're still getting rides that way with some pretty decent teams. If you've got a big sponsor, you can get in somebody's car. And Hamlin didn't have that. I mean, stories are legend, and I know they're true about multiple remortgages of the Hamlin homestead just to keep Denny racing. And I think he does appreciate that. And I think he does appreciate that he has earned it. I mean, there's no question about it. He has earned it. And the sponsorship came, and FedEx loves the guy, and the FedEx people love the guy. And
he's been with them. FedEx has stayed with him from day one. You can't argue that result right there.
Yeah. Yep.
So the next guy, I don't think another one, nobody expected him to not be in the playoffs. That's Chase Elliott. Then you got one that stands out in getting an accomplishment because of the last 6 or 7 year history. Brad Keselowski at RFK Racing. They struggled. Brad, he's in the playoffs. That's kind of impressive to me because we all know that Roush struggled for several years. Do you think that they're on an upswing, or do you think it's another one of those situations of a driver getting more done with less equipment?
No, I think they're definitely, I think it's a combination of both, Roy. I think he has, and he didn't just go in there, didn't go into RFK and pound on his chest and say, I'm the new boss and I'm making the decisions. He has slowly earned the respect of everybody in that race team. He has certainly earned the respect of Jack Roush and the other powers that be with that organization. And I do remember talking to him during his first season there. And he shared with me there were a lot of things that he could see that needed to be changed, but it was a culture that needed to be changed. And I think that's transpired over the last couple of years. And there's a different vibe around RFK than there was when it was just Roush Fenway Racing. And Brad Keselowski is 95% responsible for that. He's earned his position in the playoffs. Do I see him as a getting a second championship ring this year? Probably not, because they've just not been that consistent. And it was that way with Buescher this year too. They had some inconsistency. More often than not, they brought much better cars to the racetrack this year in general than they had. And I think they're going to do nothing but continue to improve. They'll keep all the good people. Obviously, Buescher thought up to the very end that he was going on to the next round. He was going on to the playoffs, and Chase Briscoe had another idea, kept him out. But I think that organization's definitely on the upswing.
Right. And Duck said, I mean, seeing him in the playoffs, that's a big thing. And I know that when he come there and he's like the first interviews, and, he said, we've got a long way to go. This is not where it needs to be. He said that from the beginning. And then in just a few years there, here we are, he's in the playoffs. I think that you're right. I just didn't know what your take was on it, because I know everybody that knows Keselowski knows he can get it done even in a little bit less equipment if you ever watched him race. So.
The funny thing about Brad is, before I moved to the mountains of Virginia, he and I actually went to the same church in North Carolina. And Brad's reputation was that he was known to, with some regularity, 2:00 in the morning, pick up the telephone and call his crew chief, wake his crew chief up and say, hey, I just had this idea. We can do this and this and this. So I asked our pastor about it. I said, does Brad ever call you in the middle of the night? He said, by golly, he does. He said, he calls me when I'm in bed, sound asleep. Hey, Pastor, I was just thinking about something. His mind works 24 hours a day. It just does. And he's a very creative guy, very bright guy. He runs a very successful business, totally outside of racing, that nobody seems to know much about. And I know a little bit about it.
I don't know anything about it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's a manufacturing company. and he was struggling a little bit getting the right people in the right seats of the bus and the management of that company. But it's now a very successful company there in North Carolina. So Brad, he's got plenty to do. Let's leave it at that.
Well, all successful people are that way. If you beat and just like you, we had to delay a little bit, get started this morning. I know that you have a busy schedule especially over the next several weeks. You got a lot going on too, and you got your business on the side, the church camp, the things. I don't know how you find the time to do what you do traveling. We just did 2 weekends of racing at dirt tracks over here, and I'm trying to recover from that.
Well, I realize at my age, Roy, that I don't, under the best of circumstances, I may have another good 7 or 8 years of being able to run at a pretty good clip 7 days a week. And that's what I'm doing. Right now I'm working on trying to get some grant money for Camp Bethel here in Virginia. And I'll do that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then Friday morning, I'll get on I'm actually driving to Atlanta this weekend. It's about a 6-hour drive. I'm going to take my wife with me. And I'll be there working long days at the racetrack. And then Monday morning, I'll drive back to do it all over again at Camp Bethel. So, but I'm enjoying it. I enjoy it.
It's very interesting. We're talking right now, and you're going to Atlanta this weekend. When you were on before, you were leaving afterwards to go to Atlanta too. So maybe it's just
that's right.
Atlanta,
Yeah, I forgot about that.
That's kind of interesting. So, well, and then you got the number 22, Joey Logano. That's not any surprise there. Kind of maybe where he's standing points wise might be a little bit of a surprise, but not really. Setting number 10, another one of those drivers, Austin Cindric. This is going to sound bad. I didn't even realize he was racing in Cup Series. He's just another one you don't hear much about.
Well, he's another one kind of cut out of that Penske mold, and obviously his dad is the president of the race, the racing operations there. But Austin's never really, I don't think, tried to use his dad's position to get opportunities. He's a very talented race driver. Obviously, he won an Xfinity Series championship. Certainly didn't back into it. I don't know why he hasn't been as good, any better. Although I look back at Byron, Byron's first couple of years, even at Hendrick, and it took him a while for the light to come on and for him to then start being consistently fast everywhere. Once in a while, Austin Cindric, man, you'll see them be really good and they hit on it and he's fast. I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for him. He's not going to do anything to, Roger has very high standards for the people that work for his company and drive his race cars and work on his race teams. And Austin Cindric is one of those cut out of the cloth, out of the Penske cloth kind of a guy. Is he going to be a consistent top 5 guy, a potential championship contender? I don't see that happening this year. And I'm going to have to see a lot more out of him. And I think something is going to have to click in the next couple of years or two. And if he doesn't start contending for wins and championships more frequently, like his two teammates, Blaney and Logano, are doing, and maybe the only thing that mitigated in his favor a bit this year, the Penske cars haven't been that great for the most part this year. Flashes of brilliance, but not consistently so. So
that's what I was saying about Joey Logano. He's in there. Nobody expected him to not be in there.
Yeah.
But he hasn't done anything other than be a part of somebody else's controversy, in my honest opinion.
You're right. Yeah. True.
Now, the next one is the one that shocked me when getting all the notes and stuff together today. I didn't expect his name to be in there, but Trackhouse Racing and Daniel Suarez. I'm happy he's in there. I think that's cool as crap. I like Daniel Suarez. I like what he's had to do to get into NASCAR. Seeing him in the playoffs is pretty impressive, but he's another one of the ones that you were talking about. I don't know that he's going to advance to the next round.
No, probably not, because even the one win that he got to put him into the playoffs, that was a 3-wide photo finish, as you remember. That was the last time we talked at Atlanta, and probably the greatest finish in NASCAR history, in my opinion.
Well, that's
And I've been around.
it,
I've been around for a long time. But Trackhouse Racing, I don't know what's happened, because they came right out of the starting gate as good as anybody, better than all the Chevys with this new generation race car. They seem to have had their best at the beginning and haven't improved. The other teams have not only caught up, but they've kind of gone around them. Everybody over at that organization is working their tail off. They'll be a contender once again. Probably not going to be this year. They're going to have to regroup, I think, and be better. Chastain, boy, Ross just was never, and it wasn't that he can't drive a race. You don't forget how to drive a race car, and
right.
both of them are talented. And I'm with you. I would almost be surprised if Daniel got out of the first round of the playoffs.
Right. And like I said, I am not picking on Daniel in any shape, form, or fashion, because I like the guy. I like people that have to do a lot of extra things that move in there and come into our sport and do things like that. I mean, that's why I was a big fan of Danica. I was a big fan of Juan Pablo Montoya. I like that because they have to do a lot. I mean, Daniel Suarez had to learn English when he come over here. He's had to get his citizenship. That's a lot when you got a full race schedule. I mean, and that, to me, that's always impressive.
You know, funny is 2 race wins have come at Atlanta, where we'll go next, and at the road course at Sonoma, and we're going to Watkins Glen, different road course. But here we are, 2 of the first 3 races in this round of playoffs, tracks that he's won on, or type of track that he's won on. And yet I'm not going to be at all shocked if he doesn't even make it to the next round. I just had not seen the consistency in that team that indicates to me he's going to be any kind of a force.
So then you have, I'll be honest with you, when the season started here in the name, I really thought we were going to see Alex Bowman sitting in the top 3 in points. I don't know if he kind of rested on his laurels, getting in early, resting on his laurels. I don't know. That's a tough one to call anything about him, because when the chips are down, he's been impressive in the past. So I don't know what we're going to see out of him going into the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't know. I think back to the first time that he splashed onto the scene, subbing for Junior, and nearly won at Phoenix. And since that point in time, I've thought he's going to be a star. He's going to be a star. And it's just never quite happened. He got Harris over there from Front Row Motorsports, his crew chief. I thought together these 2 young guys would really start to light it up, and there just hasn't been any consistency there. And the one race that he won, he didn't have the best car. He was in the hunt and made some late race calls on pit stops and so forth that got him the win to get him into the playoffs. But at some point in time, and I think next year is probably going to be the make or break year for Alex in that race car. And I know he's got the contract that he signed was 2 years for 24, 25, but he's going to be on the hot seat if he doesn't perform in the balance of these playoffs. He needs a good playoff run to at least have some momentum going into a 2025 season. That has to be a better one for him.
Well, and then the Darlington encouragement out of this, you got Chase Briscoe coming in here, the only Stewart-Haas car in the championship. Stewart-Haas leaving at the end of the year. It looks like Gene Haas is going to go back to a 1-car operator at the end of the year. We're hearing talks about Trackhouse possibly getting a couple of the charters from them, moving around. A lot of uncertainty in this team to make the chase right here. What are your thoughts on Chase going into the playoffs? I
honestly think looking at the 12 guys that are in front of him, I think at this juncture, I would rank him maybe at about the midpoint of that group.
Yep.
Because I think they are at their best that they've been all season. He was another one that we monitored and tracked the whole race at Darlington. He was almost never out of the top 3. And on that last restart, Richard Boswell told him, his crew chief, said, if you give me your best last 26 laps, you will win this race. And that's exactly what the move that he made from the top to the bottom, down onto the flat and going into turn number 3 at Darlington to take the lead was, I mean, it doesn't get any better than that as a driver. When I saw him do it, I thought there's no way. I thought he's gonna slide up the racetrack and wipe out all 3 of them. And he just drove right around him and stayed in the throttle, and it stuck, or he drove it in there. But here's another guy that dirt track background, and there's a reason why Joe Gibbs signed him, and it's not because Chase Briscoe's got a rich daddy, because he doesn't. He knows what kind of talent is in that kid, and he's a good kid too. Really, he's a great family man. He's great for sponsors. He's everything that Joe Gibbs wanted. But I'm not sure they would have hired him unless they thought he was going to win races and contend for a championship. Maybe not this year, but if you're looking for a long shot horse to put your money on to get to the 8, the grade 8, maybe the championship 4. But I would say if he's out after the first round, I'll be shocked. If he's not still in it after the second round, I'll be shocked. I think he's at least among the final 8, if not going to the championship 4.
Well, and let's face it, he's got a new thing ahead of him next year. He wants to go out on a high note.
Yep.
They kind of have that, going to prove the critics wrong and show them of what Stewart Haas Racing, they want them to go out on a high note, I'm sure. And I think that's a little motivation going into it. Now the next one, I have to ask you, and I know we have heard every pundit out here, and if I don't ask about the next driver, I'm going to get some grief from somebody. Harrison Burton won at Daytona, went from 34th to going into the playoffs at 14th. That is a huge thing. I heard Dale Jr. say, look, it's a great thing. He won the lottery. The Wood brothers are going to finish no less than 16th in the points. They doubled their position in the standings just by the one win. And that equates to they're going to get a lot bigger paycheck at the end of the season to finance what they're going into next year. Everybody likes the first race win for anybody in NASCAR or any racing series. You, as a person that's followed the sport a lot longer, been a part of it a lot longer, knowing that NASCAR's point system is always, and you've mentioned it, numerous drivers, we talked about consistency. This driver's in the playoffs, not a negative thing in any shape, form, or fashion when I say this. No consistency.
Yeah.
Does that cheapen the playoffs in your mind, or does it make it a great story?
Does it cheapen it? No, I don't think, Roy, it cheapens it. I mean, I think when you consider all of the benefits of this current playoff system versus what we had previous, when very often the championship was pretty much determined with 10 races to go in the season.
Right.
And now we've got 16 guys that theoretically any one of them could win the championship. Now, I grew up in Indiana when high school basketball was king. You probably saw the movie Hoosiers. Okay.
Absolutely. Love it.
And what made Indiana basketball so special 60 years ago, they had single class. There was one class. They didn't have 5 classes. Big schools are in one class. Little schools are in another class. Every high school basketball team in the state of Indiana went into the same tournament to 64 sectional sites. And then the sectional winner would go to the regional, and there would be 16 regional winners. Then there'd be 4 going to the state championship, 4 that would go to the semi-state, and then the state championship. Once in a while, going into a tournament, some little podunk school from nowhere, Indiana, Milan was the school that Milan, Indiana, won the state championship. I watched, I can't remember the kid's name. He ended up going on to play pro basketball, but I mean, near the end of when we had single class basketball in Indiana, a very small school, went through the entire tournament and won the state championship. Usually didn't happen. Okay. It usually didn't happen. It's probably not going to happen here, but just the drama of watching things unfold and watching some just fold their tents, and you think, well, what the heck happened? Why in the world is Logano out after the first round of the playoffs? like he was last year, right? Out after the first round of the playoffs. And that is almost as dramatic as a Harrison Burton walk-off win at Daytona. And I'm going to say that Harrison's win was very different from Briscoe's win, because Harrison wasn't running in the top 5, the top 10, the entire race at Daytona. But don't we always talk about that being a wild card race and win and you're in? And I'm so excited about it. And yet why people complain when it happens. That having been said, I don't know of anybody who has ever met Harrison Burton that doesn't just love the kid. I mean, he's a wonderful kid. Everybody loved his dad, Jeff. They're a great family. I want the best for Harrison. I'd love to see him winning races. He's been at Wood Brothers. The two guys who preceded him there both ran better than he has run in his tenure there. What the future holds for Harrison Burton, I don't know. Now, I have to admit, up until this year, you had to be in the top 30 in points, even if you won a race,
right,
to be in the playoffs. And they changed that this year. So he wouldn't have made it if they hadn't made that rule change. And I still have not gotten a clear answer on why that rule change was made. Do I think it cheapens the sport? No. And you know what I would love to see happen, and I don't expect it to happen, but if Harrison Burton survives the first round, he's playing with what they call house money right now. You know what I'm saying? No, everybody's expectations for him are zero. So if he'd move on to the next round and eliminate a driver that is coming in with a lot more hoopla, a lot better season under their belt, I think that would be really cool. I mean, I love all the unexpectedness of this playoff format. And I know there's some people that still think we ought to go back to the old way, and it's points accumulated throughout the year. And everybody says, well, they developed this new system because Jimmy Johnson won 7 championships, 5 of them in a row. Will that happen under this format? No, it's never going to happen again. Do I think that's a bad thing for the sport? No, I think it's a very good thing for the sport, because you want fans tuning into the TV or going to the racetrack all the way to the last lap at Phoenix, because down to the very last lap, there are 4 people who can win the championship. And that doesn't happen in any other sport.
All right, so I'm going to throw in my 2 cents or to follow up what you're talking about with this. Okay, he won at Daytona Super Speedway. You want to see him to advance to the next round. An easy advance is win a race. Okay, you got a little momentum because all this going, you got the Wood brothers saying, hey, let's take advantage of this where we're at, make a little more name for yourself. We're going to Atlanta, who is, everybody says it's a smaller track that races like a super speedway. The stage is set for him to get another win shortly after that one and upset everybody's apple cart on that. That's just my opinion. I don't know what your thoughts are. Wood brothers excel on the bigger tracks. They always have.
They have, and I know they've got the same engine and aero package at Atlanta that they do at Talladega and Daytona. But I think they're completely different in the way they race. And okay. Talladega, it's all about strategy. I mean, you're running wide open every lap. Daytona, you're running wide open every lap until you've got 25 or 30 laps on your tires, and then you may have to lift a little bit if you're in the draft and whatnot. Atlanta, you still got to drive those cars, and
right.
They may run wide open for 6 lap new tires, but after that, handling comes into play. And what a driver is willing to do to horse a car. Hey, I'm going to say I never saw Harrison Burton race as hard as I did those last 2 laps at Daytona. He had every opportunity to just say, "Okay, Kyle Busch, you're my elder. You're the 2-time champion," and he could have just folded his tent and gone home, and he did not. I mean, he was not going to lose that race. So I know that's in there. I know that's in him somewhere. Is that going to come out at Atlanta? Far less likely at Atlanta than it was at Daytona.
Well, we like to build a little drama about it because
Sure.
it's kind of in that thing, and the
It's not
stage is set for him
impossible.
to do something. Yeah.
It's not impossible.
So Kenny Wallace, I watch his stuff regularly. He's been on here, talked to him. I love to listen to Kenny. He's funny. He keeps you entertained. Came out with the little thing. And I don't know, I didn't listen to Kyle Busch's response, but Harrison Burton got a push from, I believe it's Parker Ratzlaff on that restart to get him out there. There was a lot of hubbub made about Chevrolet being mad that Parker pushed Harrison Burton out there. Do you think that was as big of a thing as everybody said, or not so much? You're an insider. You know the behind the scenes. I just want to know if it was really that big of a deal.
I think pre-race at these, especially the super speedways, everybody likes to talk about, that every manufacturer gathers all its drivers together and says, you guys need to make sure that a Toyota wins, or you need to make sure that a Chevy wins, or you make sure that a Ford wins. During the running of the race, I'd say probably up to the last 20 or 30 laps, if you can help a teammate, or you can help somebody who's driving the same brand car that you are, or help somebody else, you're going to help the guy that's your teammate, but you get down to the last 20 laps or so of a race, you get down to the last 5 laps of the race or 2 laps of the race, like it was at Daytona. The last thing on Parker Retzlaff's mind was, now, do I help a Ford or do I help a Chevy? Because I absolutely believe that he's thinking, if I push Kyle Busch is going to win the race. If I push Harrison Burton, I may have a shot to get, to make a move and win the race. I think the only thing on Parker Retzlaff's mind is, oh my gosh, I've never won an Xfinity Series race, and here I could win at Daytona. And he saw that as his
second or third start in NASCAR.
He saw that as his best chance to get a cup win. That's the only reason he did what he did.
All right, and we're coming up right on the hour mark. This way, where I try to cut it off that way because that's whatever. But the last 2 drivers, Ty Gibbs and Martin Truex Jr. Martin Truex Jr. retiring. Ty Gibbs, a relatively new person in there. Not where I expected either one of them to be playoff points wise, but they're there. And Martin Truex, no wins. But now I want to bring those 2 while we're talking about that, and we'll end it on this segment. I have some people that have mentioned out, we have a changing of the guard in NASCAR going on. We talked and kind of led up to a little bit. The older names we're used to are leaving. The newer names are coming in. But we haven't talked about team owners making the transitioning out of it. I have heard through the grapevine that there's 2 drivers. We talked a little bit about Austin Dillon. We're talking about Ty Gibbs. They both, and Austin Dillon, there was headlining him saying that he's open to taking a more managerial role at Richard Childress Racing. Let's face it, Richard Childress is at that time where he wants to go get out of it. Joe Gibbs had a plan in place. Things happened. That plan didn't come to fruition. I have heard that Ty Gibbs is being groomed to take over that, and we don't expect him being there. Martin Truex headed out. Chase Briscoe is coming, or not, I think Tyler Reddick or whichever one's coming over to take over for him. Is there any truth to those rumors that you know of, or maybe we're seeing it? We're seeing Jeff Gordon taking on a more managerial role at Hendrick Racing. We're Brad Keselowski at RFK. Are we starting to see the changing of the guard and the new ownership or the new management teams in NASCAR coming, in your opinion?
I think we are, but as it relates to Ty Gibbs, ask me that question again in another 12 to 15 years. Okay. Because anybody that's talking about him being groomed to do anything other than to finally win a race and finally contend for a championship, there's nothing other than that on his mind or Grandpa's mind. In fact, it's kind of interesting because, of course, when JD passed away, Coy stepped up. JD's brother, Ty's dad, stepped up, and he had run his own motorcycle team and had a couple of riders and and had some success there. So he had some management experience, but Coy had never run an operation the size of JGR.
Right.
And he stepped in and was growing into that role when, like his older brother, sadly, he passed away right before his 50th birthday. And now Ty's mom, Coy's widow, Heather, has taken a very high profile management position at JGR. And from the people that I've heard talk about her, she's really sharp gal. So we can maybe talk about Heather Gibbs, Ty's mom, growing into a prominent role at JGR. But I don't think, Ty's almost become, someone would probably shoot me to hear me say this, but he's almost becoming the Sheldon Creed of the Cup Series. He didn't have as many second place finishes, but we started last season saying he's definitely going to win a race. He's definitely going to win a race. And when he didn't this year, okay, yes, it's going to happen. It's going to happen early and often in 2024. We're still waiting for it. Right. What it is, I don't know. It's always the toughest to win they say the toughest one is your second one. It doesn't start getting easier till your third win. The first one you think's never going to come. The second one is the tough one because you think it may never happen again. But once you get two under your belt, now you're going to start winning races. And history pretty much bears that out. I still think once he wins, he's going to start winning with some regularity. Next year, he will be in championship contention. Sadly, with he and Truex at the bottom of the barrel, both almost 40 points behind, they've got a long, long uphill pull. Wouldn't it just be fantastic if Martin Truex Jr. comes in as the 16th seed and regains his early season form and keeps pointing and winning his way all the way to the championship four? Wouldn't that be awesome to see him go out by winning his second championship? Would it take a miracle? You better believe it. Is it totally out of the question? Maybe.
If you follow Martin Truex the other way, you know that is never out of the question.
That's right.
Ever. So
That's right.
I'm just going to say that we've seen some big shoes filled through the seasons past. Martin Truex has come through when it's had to be. And, he's got the next few weeks to get that covered, and I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he does. That's just my 2 cents worth.
That's what I'm hoping for, Roy.
So that's what I said. But
I'll place your $20 bill down on a bet because I'm not going to bet my money on it, but I'd love to see it happen.
Well, and I don't know, and it's hard to pick any of those, and that's just kind of my thing. I told you the three I think is going to be there at the end. And I'm just going to show that I don't know what's going to happen because none of those three will be there with my luck. So it's as they say, the announcer's curse. I'm not going to say anything. Yeah. So now let's hit some things that we saw and try to do quickly. Next year going into it, some interesting things came out. Got a race in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Got a race at Rockingham. A race at North Wilkesboro. And then a track that has a huge amount of history in NASCAR. You always talk about it. You've heard every old-time driver talk about going and racing there. Bowman Gray Stadium. Okay, you as an announcer and knowing all the shows and everything that we've seen about there, are we going to see the same kind of sparks, for lack of a better term, at Bowman Gray when we see the NASCAR teams hit the racetrack there? Or is it going to be a much more tame version?
Are you crazy? Of course we're going to. I mean, there are no points at stake. It's all pride. It's how long has it been since NASCAR's raced there?
I have no idea. It's been a while because I didn't even know where Bowman Gray was till about 8 years ago. So we're going to leave that alone.
Well, and I got to say, I'm ashamed of myself in that I lived in the Charlotte area for 28 years, nearly 28 years. Never made it to Bowman Gray. And now I'm living in the mountains of Virginia. I may never make it to Bowman Gray because unfortunately that will be, well, fortunately for the MRN guys, because they're our broadcast brethren, but that's going to be an MRN broadcast. And I would have loved to either do North Wilkesboro. And I'm an old track guy. I'm I like nice amenities, but I love the Harold Brasington's Minnow Pond story about how Darlington's shaped like it was.
Right.
I love Rockingham, that egg-shaped racetrack. I can't wait to see another race there. To me, I never thought North Wilkesboro, because I used to drive by North Wilkesboro pretty regularly on 421 year after year, watching it just get more and more depressing. And then Junior got things stirred up, and here we go. And how this whole Bowman Gray thing came about, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Probably whoever first suggested, hey, we've done Bowman Gray and we're going to go back with the Xfinity and trucks at Rockingham. Why not Bowman Gray? Yeah, let's do it. But God bless Ben Kennedy and whoever he's got helping him make decisions, because since he's taken over, and I know there are a lot of critics about going to Mexico. Why not? You know, and everybody says, and I've heard people, I'm living in Virginia, and in fact, at the barbershop this morning, I had a guy telling me, I can't believe they're taking our race away from us. And here's what I said to him. If there were more than 25,000 butts in those seats at both Richmond races, that race would never have been taken away. But for whatever reason, the crowd has just, and it used to be jam-packed. Now, what happened at Pocono, and I'm wandering off on one of my rabbit trails, but at Pocono, they cut back from 2 races to 1, and they packed the place. New Hampshire, they cut us back because that's a PRN track. That's an SMI track. Cut it back from 2 races to 1, and the crowd is now huge at that one race. So I don't know. I don't know that we're giving up all that much. Why not go down there? Why not go see how many of Daniel's amigos really show up? Or it may be the biggest attended race, of the season. I don't know, but I love the energy that it's generating and the interest that it's generating to say, hey, we're going international.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Pocono. I've had the pleasure of sitting down and talking to Joe Mattioli, and got to know him through my buddy Ed and all that stuff. And it's kind of interesting you brought up Pocono on that one as well. So, by
the way, before we go, tell Ed I said hello when you talk to him again.
I haven't seen Ed in quite a while. Somewhere down the road, I'd like to have you come back and get on here with Ed, because
that'd be fun. Yeah, that would be fun.
Ed is one of the funniest guys to sit and talk to you. You've got a great personality. And if we could get Kenny Wallace to join on that one.
Oh, my gosh.
That would be, I'm sorry, Radio Gold. Y'all have the history, and I just get to sit back and listen, because it's awesome. And, I would love to have you back. I like talking to you. I have a good time talking to you. And like I said, I appreciate your time on all this. And I think we're going to end it on there. If you had to pick a name right now, can you pick one?
To win the championship?
Yes.
Larson gets his second.
I didn't want to do that.
I did not want to pick the guy that's sitting at the top of the heat, but I can't I can't see any other way than him. He's gonna be in the championship 4, and if he's in the championship 4, you just don't know. But I gotta say Larson gets a second.
That's exactly the same person I was gonna say. One last topic, and we can keep this one short and sweet.
Okay.
Your thoughts on Kyle Larson say he'd whoop Max Verstappen's butt on the track?
That is so unlike Kyle Larson. But I wouldn't bet against it.
I wouldn't either. And I think Kevin Harvick's take on it's like, you know what? He can back those words up. They said, You give Kyle some laps in any race car, he's going to adapt and he's going to make it work.
Oh, yeah.
It's not going to go the other way. And I thought that was very interesting on Kevin Harvick's. He had the
Let
best
me put it
take
this way. It would take Kyle Larson about 1/10 the time to be competitive in a Formula One car than it would take Max Verstappen to come compete in a NASCAR race. Okay.
And the proof's in how he ran at Indy 500. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah. He didn't get to finish. He made a couple of mistakes, rookie mistakes, but he was fast all month long. And pre-race, there's nobody that said there's no chance that he could be the winner. And for somebody going there for the very first time, learning, and pit stops are huge, and there's so many of them there. Yeah, I mean, and he didn't get her done, and he wants to go back and do it again. And I think if he goes back a second time, watch out.
Yeah.
Watch out.
I think so too. And on that note, we're going to sign off right here. Rob, appreciate your time. Hang tight for just a second. We'll end the recording and we'll get it out.
I enjoyed it. Take care.